Welcome into Mondays in Midtown. I'm your host, Willy McKenna, as we're getting ready to kick off our third season broadcasting here on SLU-TV. We've got a great slate of shows out for you this season, so let's go ahead and jump right into it with episode number 1 of the 2012-2013 school year. Let's start off with Jack Strauss. He's a business school professor at the John Cook School of Business here at St. Louis University. He's going to be talking to us a little bit about city growth via immigration.
The Economic Council of St. Louis and the City of St. Louis are interested in exploring ways to improve the economic development of our city and region. Commerce Bank then funded my research, and what I did and showed was that there was a positive economic and statistical relationship between cities that experience immigration and economic growth. So cities that experience increases of more foreign-born people tend to grow faster. People tend to have higher wages. There tends to be lower unemployment. So one thing I found also interesting is that the effect of immigrants on, for instance, African Americans. And this is a kind of a common topic because I have given some television interviews and radio interviews, and people on the radio have called in and asked or said, you know, we have double-digit unemployment in the north part of St. Louis County, and certainly a double-digit unemployment in the city among African Americans. Aren't African Americans vulnerable to low-wage immigrants? And the perception actually is the perception is that they actually are vulnerable, and there is a kind of a political / media perception that there is a Hispanic / African American kind of rivalry, and I'm not denying that there is this kind of political rivalry going on in cities between African Americans and Hispanics. So what I've done over the last several months actually is explore whether increases in immigrants also hurt African Americans. And again, the reason why this is an interesting topic is they tend to be pretty vulnerable already because they tend to be sometimes on the margins, because sometimes they are actually unemployed or they're dropping out of the labor force. Over the next year, there's a task force that's been set up that the mayor is in front of, and that Charles Dooley, who's head of the St. Louis County, also is in favor of pushing ways to encourage more people from other countries to move and set up jobs here. And what I show in my research is that one reason why St. Louis is very slow growing over the last decade, where we've created no jobs, in fact we're down. And the reason why, primarily, or at least a good part of that, is due to a lack of immigration. Cities where people are not moving to. And so what the evidence actually shows is that immigrants do not hurt African Americans, and that they actually help African American wages and unemployment because they tend to be complements. So when they move here, for instance, they're populating the schools, so we don't have to. Right now, we're faced, for instance, with shutting down a lot of schools in St. Louis City. Well, that's not occurring in other cities. And so when we shut down the schools, some of the janitors, some of the teachers, of course, the principals are African Americans, and so the city as a whole, downtown, is suffering as we're shutting down, I think, perhaps more than a dozen schools over the last 10 years, although I think even more than that. But in other regions, they're not doing that. They're expanding because Hispanics or people from Asia are populating the cities and they're paying taxes. So that means that people who are living in the city, including African Americans, are benefiting because then they're getting other jobs. Cities that experience more foreign-born people, more immigrants, do grow faster. And so St. Louis is taking this evidence, as I mentioned, to encourage a more proactive policy toward immigrants, and that's what we're working on over the next year. So what I found was the statistical evidence shows that when immigrants move to cities, including downtown regions, the area as a whole benefits, and in this case a rising tide lifts all boats, and African Americans do benefit from increases in immigration. They don't have to fear losses of jobs from other immigrants. We're having a hard time keeping the young educated people in St. Louis, so we have to find a way, and I think this immigration approach is a way to kind of rejuvenate our downtown region, rejuvenate parts of the Central West End and University City, etc., with young educated people.
We would like to thank Professor Strauss for that great interview and that great in-depth look into immigration in the city of St. Louis. We now move on to a little bit of a tougher subject here on Mondays in Midtown. 2 years ago, we talked to Meagan Boken, one of the seniors that year on the St. Louis University women's volleyball team. I did an interview with her that year as we were talking about her senior season and the team that year. Unfortunately, just a few weeks right before school started, Meagan was murdered in the Central West End. And we just wanted to go ahead and throw that interview back out to show the viewers what a lovely girl Meagan was, and just keep her in our thoughts and prayers, and her family, as it's a very tough time even as we go on. This week's Billiken Profile took us over to the Chaffetz Pavilion, where we met up with Meagan Boken of the St. Louis University women's volleyball team. Meagan is a 5'11" senior from Wheaton, Illinois, and is majoring in business administration. St. Louis University women's volleyball has a strong winning tradition with a history of great team chemistry. During Meagan's time at SLU, the women's volleyball team has had great success, not only because of star players, but because of team unity.
The girls also seemed to get along really well. They had a good chemistry, and I kind of just wanted to go somewhere where it felt right, and it kind of felt like a good fit for me.
This year's women's volleyball team faces bigger challenges than they have had to face in recent years because of a very young team that they are putting on the court.
Like, we're such a young team. We have so many freshmen and sophomores, and we've been trying out different lineups, and so like this is like our last preseason tournament. I think we're starting to finally hit our stride, whereas before we kind of had our unit, like we knew we were going to do from the beginning, but now we're just kind of like figuring it out and like going from there. So we're in a good place right now, though, so it's good.
This year's main challenge for Meagan is being the only senior on the team. Responsibility needs to be an intricate part of her game this year.
Well, I try and just be, like a leader for the girls, or, if they need someone to talk to, I'm trying to be there for them. And just since, I've been around and I know, the drill, I try and, just like keep it consistent and, help them out if they need something, and just kind of like be a steady on the court too, since, I've been there.
Even with this being a young team, there is great hope for the future with the current young and talented roster. Meagan knows that these players will contribute greatly this year and will have great potential in the future.
Gosh, everyone's so good. Like, everyone, is going to have their chance. And Alyssa Dino is a junior, and she's my roommate, actually, and she's awesome. She's doing so good this year, and so she'll be a senior next year. And then Carly Markham is a sophomore, and she's in the middle, and she's been doing real well, like her blocking, her hitting, everything like that. She has so much, potential. She's going to do awesome. And then I think Hannah Kavitli, she's our freshman setter, and she's been doing awesome. And being the setter is like a really tough position, and there's a lot of, stress on you and pressure, and she's been handling it so well, and she's just a freshman, so I think she's only going to get better from here. So
one of the main factors in a successful team is leadership from the head coach position. Meagan clearly knows that this presence is felt on the women's volleyball team.
She's awesome. Like, the main thing is she just cares about us so much, and she just wants us to succeed in, every aspect of our life. Like, she works so hard for us, at practice and scouting and everything, and she wants us to do good on the court, but also she understands, we're students too. We also, need to have time to study, and she also wants us to have a social life. She wants us to be able to interact with other people, and enjoy the whole college experience. So it's been awesome. She's great.
Meagan has great expectations for not only herself, but also every one of her teammates.
For my team, I think that we're just, right now, as I said, we're ending preseason, and right now we're kind of like hitting our stride. And so I think for the rest of the season, we want to kind of work off that and keep building. And since we're so young too, like we have like our learning curve, we can get so much better, you know, like with every week. And so I think we just want to keep building, you know, towards the end of the season when it really counts, like conference tournament and hopefully NCAAs and things like that. And I guess as an individual, I just want to be, you know, a leader on the court and off the court and, you know, be steady and consistent.
Meagan is obviously an incredible leader on and off the court. She's made it very obvious that it is not only volleyball that she cares about, but also her peers. Be sure to look out for Meagan and all of her teammates at every home match at Chaffetz Arena and Chaffetz Pavilion. And that was a look at a 2010 interview of Meagan Boken from the St. Louis volleyball team, a tragic story for all the students here around St. Louis University. We're now joined by Natalie Tjaden of GIC, the Great Issues Committee, here at St. Louis University. And coming up tomorrow, Tuesday, September 18th, we will be having a speaker. Go ahead and tell us, Natalie, just a little bit about who's going to be here.
Well, Great Issues Committee and myself are excited to bring Mr. Bob Bokel and Cal Thomas to St. Louis University. They are part of Common Ground. Their book is Common Ground, How to Stop the Partisan War, and they have a column in the USA Today, and their goal is to teach their readers, you know, how do we go from being so divided, conservatives and liberals and Democrats and Republicans, and how can we work together more in the political spectrum? And with this being an election year, obviously there's always people on both sides, Republicans, Democrats, and then other smaller parties as well. But what is the main message that these two speakers want to get across to a young college crowd? Well, the importance with college students is that, you know, a lot of them are just turning 18 and they're just, you know, learning to vote. And, you know, we can act partisanly and we can be staunchly Democratic or staunchly Republican, but Common Ground wants us to see, you know, the issues differently. Maybe not look at them as so black and white, but gray area. How can we work together and make the country move forward rather than just stay stagnant? And I don't know if you know just a little bit about what exactly does their column talk about in USA Today that they write about? You know, the partisan war, Democrats, Republicans, conservative, liberals, that black and white, those two parties, that is, they want to stop that war between the sides. They want us to get to work together and to see, you know, maybe more of a gray area. Where can the country, you know, come together and move forward instead of just staying there and arguing about the issues? If you could talk to SLU students directly, and maybe they'd be wondering, you know, not necessarily all 18-year-olds are really that interested in politics, but why should they come out to this speech? Well, I tell them, why not? You've got an election year. Our country, you know, there's a lot of new things happening. There's a lot of changes that can happen. So why not educate yourself? Why not be an informed voter? And why not, you know, do what you can to be involved in the political process? I think whether you are, you know, politically minded or not, this would be a great event to come to, and you could definitely learn a lot. And maybe just a little bit also, let's talk about GIC in general. You're a senior this year, so obviously you've been around a little bit to see the different speakers that come in. Right. What have you seen GIC do for the student body here at SLU? Well, I think Great Issues Committee, we are always trying to keep the issues that are relevant to the student body in mind. And our goal when we're bringing in speakers is what is the issue that is most affecting the student body. And with this, we thought in an election year, what better, you know, with the partisan war, what better speaker can we bring in? So we're always just trying to be relevant to the student body and what is going to make students interested to come to our events. Thank you so much, Natalie, for joining us here on Mondays in Midtown. Well, thank you for having me, and I hope that all the students watching will come to the Great Issues Committee tomorrow. Absolutely. Just another reminder, Tuesday, September 18th, it'll be Common Ground, How to Stop the Partisan War. Welcome back into Mondays in Midtown. We have a very special report coming up. Our very own Amanda Honigfort went and took a look at KWMU, St. Louis Public Radio. They just moved to their new location down here in the Grand Center. So let's go take a look at all the new facilities KWMU has to offer.
This weekend, 90.7 KWMU, St. Louis Public Radio, celebrated the grand opening of their new Midtown St. Louis studios. Located at 3651 Olive Street in Grand Center, this three-story, 27,000-square-foot facility includes new studios, community facilities, an expanded newsroom, and more. At 10:15 a.m. Saturday morning, General Manager Tim Eby, University of Missouri St. Louis Chancellor Tom George, and Morning Edition host Renee Montaigne cut the ribbon and officially opened the building to the public to tour. It boasts 3 digital media UMSL classrooms, 9 state-of-the-art broadcast studios, much more space, and a community space for public events. The facility is a large upgrade to St. Louis Public Radio's previous home, which was comprised of a few cramped offices, 2 broadcast studios, and an overflow trailer out back. The move will give them the space and resources they need to further their coverage of local events.
One of the things certainly that we hope to do really is to do more, have more local news reporters that are out covering the region, and the specific focus on that is really built around reporters who bring a specific area of expertise. We have a list of beat areas that we'd like to have a reporter focusing on: education, the economy, arts and culture, the environment and sustainability, perhaps a healthcare reporter, all of these areas that they can contribute reports during our Morning Edition and All Things Considered, provide expertise during our talk show at 11 o'clock that we have every day. And then, just as important as well, they'll be filing for NPR so that more stories about St. Louis are showing up on Morning Edition and All Things Considered and Marketplace and on the weekend shows as well. And so that's one of the main areas of emphasis. We also want to continue to refine the 11 o'clock shows that we have with St. Louis on the Air and Cityscape.
St. Louis Public Radio is also happy to be closer to institutions like the 9 Network of Public Media, their new neighbor, Powell Hall, the Sheldon, and SLU. They hope the close proximity will help form stronger partnerships and foster more collaboration. Tim Eby, the station's general manager, shared with me what it was like to finally be moved into the building that has been so many years in the making.
Oh, it is so energizing. The staff is so excited about the opportunity to be in this amazing space with all of the light and the technology. The state-of-the-art studios that we have is really going to make, I think, the service that we provide to the St. Louis region that much stronger. So it is so exciting.
Now that St. Louis Public Radio is moved in, progress is continuing on a public media commons that will merge the 9 Network and St. Louis Public Radio. According to Jack Alamachi, president of the 9 Network of Public Media, it will be a place where arts, education, and public media come together.
I've heard talk about a walkway going next to SLUMA between the campus and the media commons, and a walkway between the media commons and the Fox.
Yes, that is in the plans in Grand Center's larger scheme of things, to try to connect up with pedestrian walk spaces, to connect the SLU campus up to the Arts District and through our commons, and then on back to the Fox and the museum district behind there, to kind of create a place where people will want to, hang around for a little while, to walk through, make it a beautiful space, and a space where things can happen.
The Media Commons is really going to be a unique space. It's not a large space. It's about 12,000 square feet total, so it's not a huge space. But what it is it's going to be a multimedia experience for somebody to walk in there. We'll have projected video. Plans are to have a big LED screen. There'll be smaller video screens, some interactive things. One of the things that we hope that people can do is contribute to the space. We're looking at having one of the video screens be kind of an ongoing tweet board, so that if people put a certain hashtag onto a tweet, that hashtag will show up there.
It's really just more of a gathering place where we could have events or get people together, a place where people can congregate.
It's going to be really exciting and unique for St. Louis.
Thank you, Amanda, for that look at St. Louis Public Radio. You can listen to St. Louis Public Radio on 90.7 FM or stlouispublicradio.org. Up next, Professor Avis Meyer is back as he talks about freedom of the press not only in the United States, but all around the world. Let's see what Professor Meyer had to say this week.
I probably should mention up front that I've told this in several classes in the last few years since we got back from China. But it's one of my favorite journalism stories about China. This is 2005, July. And on a Sunday afternoon, having been in Beijing for 2 full days and gotten over jet lag, my wife and I took a cab to Tiananmen Square just to be there. And it was fairly deserted, and it's a vast area. There's a sort of a built-up area about the size of this desk in the middle where people standing give speeches. And there are lots and lots of guards at the far entrance, maybe 150 yards away to the Forbidden City, but there wasn't much traffic. We were just walking around, taking in that we were there. and about a half a dozen kids on bicycles, some walking, but most riding bikes, came over to us and started talking and testing their English. And they asked us if we're from America or Great Britain. We said from America, and we talked with them just a little bit. And I noticed that they were literally taking us around the back of this sort of podium where we would be largely invisible or blocked from vision of the guards that are 150 yards away at Forbidden City. And then once we got to that point, one of the kids looked around as if he was waiting for someone to say something or notice something, and nobody moved. I didn't know what was going on. They're just half a dozen kids. It crossed my mind I probably should grab my billfold, but they were small kids. Anyway, one of them reaches down and touches one of the many, many hundreds and thousands of cobblestones we're walking on, and he touches a place that's lighter in color than the dark gray of most of the cobblestone. And there's literally thousands of these. This whole place is covered. And he says a word that if I wrote it on the board, it would be spelled B-L-E-S-H, blesh. And I don't know what this means. I know just a few words of Chinese. And I repeated it, blesh, and he said yes, and he touches this cobblestone again. And I looked at him puzzled because I didn't know what blesh meant. Then he hits it harder. He says, blesh, blesh. And he rubs his hand and asks me to take my hand, and I feel it. And it's smoother than the gray part, as though it's been scrubbed clean somehow. And then I realized what he's trying to say is bleach. That this has been bleached, that the blood from the Tiananmen Square massacre, which then would have been a decade almost ago, had been scrubbed clean. And I looked out across this, and there's little white spots everywhere that you wouldn't notice because they look like a mottled complexion. They blend in. And I said something like blood. And he said, yes, blood, bleach and blood. And then a little girl who actually spoke English came up in front, and she said, I speak some English. I said, I speak almost no Chinese. And she said, this has been washed off these stones by soldiers. I said, I understand. And she said, no one knows this. Do you know this? And I didn't know what to say. I said, I understand sort of what you're saying. And then she leaned forward and said with this intensity, do you know what happened here? And of course, all of us do. We've read it. We saw it happen. And I just said without thinking, I said, yes, I do. And she looked to the left and looked to the right of her other friends, all of whom are largely invisible from the soldiers behind this structure. And she said to me, will you tell us? And so I did. We sat down the steps for about 10 minutes, and as slowly and carefully as I could, because she had to translate, I told them the story about this. And they got fairly emotional about it because they really did not know. And I thought this may be the best example of the importance of a free press I've ever seen in my life. And I've never forgotten it. And that's the story.
Thank you, Professor Meyer. Once again, as obviously we all love to hear your stories about journalism, as they are quite entertaining year in and year out. Well, that'll just about do it for this episode. We want to thank you very much for tuning into this first episode of the fall 2012 semester, as we'll be back with a plethora of more shows coming up this season. We want to go ahead and remind you that if you have any stories that you'd like us to broadcast on or do a story on, you can email us at mondaysinmidtown@gmail.com, or like our Facebook page, Mondays in Midtown. You can go ahead and watch old episodes or give us any comments on the current episodes. Once again, I'm your host, Willy McKenna, and for all the cast and crew here at Mondays in Midtown, thanks for watching.